Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. So in today's episode, we are doing something that I haven't done for a while. I think the last time I did this was November last year, and that is an everything I watched in the month of episode where we go through my Letterboxd and we just talk about all of the movies and TV shows that I watched in the previous month. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about everything that I watched in the month of February, and yes, I am aware that this is pretty late to be dropping in everything I watched in February episode, considering we are more than halfway through March, but I did want to get out my Valentine episodes and my Texas Chainsaw Massacre episodes first. So hopefully it's still going to be an episode that you guys can enjoy, and I'm not sure if you guys do like me doing these types of episodes where I recap everything that I've watched, so if you do enjoy it and it's something that you would like me to continue doing, let me know in the comments below. So in February I watched a total of 17 movies and some pretty awesome TV shows. Now, I don't actually watch as much TV as you might imagine I do. I just don't have the time to watch all the shows that I would love to watch. I generally just watch 2 episodes of something on an evening and that's that. But in February I finally watched some seasons that I was so excited to watch, so we're going to talk about those today as well. So in the past, when I've done these episodes, I've tried to group the films together in different categories, but to be honest with you, today I'm just going to go through them in order of me watching them, and we'll start with the TV shows and then get into the movies. Just a heads up before we get going, I am going to try and avoid spoilers in all of the TV shows and all of the movies as well. But there might be some comments that I make, particularly for the TV shows, where they may be considered going into spoiler territory, so I just wanted to give you a heads up. And final thing before we do get going with everything that I watched in the month of February, there are some hidden clues in my backdrop here as to what I watched last month, so see if you can spot those. So starting off with the TV shows, let's talk about Archer. Now, if you haven't seen Archer or you don't know what it is an American animated adult cartoon that follows the titular character Sterling Archer, who is a self-professed world's greatest spy, and it follows him and his work colleagues who work in an intelligence agency in America. What I love about this show is the mismatched aesthetic about it. I think it's meant to be set in the 60s. Think James Bond meets Man from U.N.C.L.E. There's lots of vintage cars, vintage fashion, cocktail glasses, very classy. But then there's also lots of modern pop culture references and modern technology like AI and robots. I love the TV series Archer, and I was so excited when at the beginning of this year we finally got the brand new seasons for it, season 11 and 12. Because we had a 2-year wait since season 10, they dropped season 11 and 12 back to back. I was so excited to have 2 seasons to binge watch through, and I did enjoy it, but I definitely don't think these seasons were as strong as previous seasons. But for a show that is now going on to have its 13th season, it's inevitable that you're going to have weaker seasons and stronger seasons, and for me, season 11 and 12 were some of the weaker ones. Part of this is due to the fact that there is a recurring theme in the seasons that I find incredibly irritating, and that is that the titular character Sterling Archer is used as a scapegoat by all of the other characters as an excuse or a blame for all of their mistakes, their bad character traits, for their issues, and usually it's just sprinkled throughout. But season 11 and 12 felt like it was just chock full of that. It was just these characters moaning and whining and complaining and blaming Archer for everything that was going wrong in their life, and it was just really irritating to watch. It was also bittersweet as we have sadly lost the actress Jessica Walters, who voiced Sterling Archer's mother, Mallory Archer, and the show gave her a really beautiful and really poignant send-off. They are apparently going ahead with season 13, so we'll see how that turns out. Once we finish season 12, I wanted more Archer, so we just went all the way back to the beginning, and now we are back through to season 9 already. I also decided to check out the Netflix show The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window. I thought that it was quite an easy, fun binge watch show. It didn't blow my mind. I gave it 3 stars on Letterboxd, but I do think that Kristen Bell is a really good comedic actor, and I think that because of her delivery, the comedy did land quite well, and I would recommend it if you do just want an easy binge watch show. Okay, next up. Ooh, this is an exciting one. I was so excited for this show. So I finally watched The Book of Boba Fett on Disney+. I love Star Wars, and this is such an exciting time to be a Star Wars fan. Disney Plus is absolutely killing it with the Star Wars TV series. I cannot wait for Kenobi coming out in May, I think. We're finally getting back to capturing what I personally love about Star Wars, and I think that The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett really fit in to the original trilogy of Star Wars. They feel like they really belong in that universe, and the prequels as well, to be honest with you. There's a lot of linking to the prequels with the Book of Boba Fett, but just the way it's stylized, the soundtrack, the colour palettes, that's what I like. It's moving away from the Skywalker trilogy and going back to the original style of Star Wars. I actually think the Book of Boba Fett might have been slightly stronger than The Mandalorian, and that is really saying something, because anybody that knows me knows that I'm slightly obsessed when it comes to The Mandalorian. I think that Fett himself is an incredibly interesting character, even dating back to the original trilogy. Just the fact that he was so quiet and just off to the side of the scene and really mysterious, and I love that we finally get a little bit of exploration into his character. And I know that there were some complaints that Boba Fett wasn't in every episode of the season, and I can understand that point, but I do think that for me it didn't really matter, because all the scenes that we did get of him, whether it was the current day setting or the flashbacks, they were so well written and so well performed that it didn't matter that he wasn't in it for the whole season. What we did get of Boba Fett I really enjoyed. I mean, I just love everything about this show, the settings, seeing the Sarlacc pit, Jabba's palace, Mos Espa, and the characters of different worlds colliding, so different incarnations of Star Wars bringing their characters into this one show. So we have Luke and R2, Ahsoka, Cad Bane, the Marshal, and of course Mando and Grogu. I squealed when I heard the Mandalorian theme at the end of one episode, and then the next episode opened with Mando in it, and between that and Luke and R2 and Grogu, well, I nearly lost my damn mind. So the pacing of the Book of Boba Fett I think is really good as well. They intercut two different storylines where they have the backstory of Boba Fett intercut with the current day situation, and then they gradually drop in more and more of the wider universe characters, and the action scenes are really good as well. And as I said, the settings are absolutely beautiful. We have some desert planets, some lush forest planets, and then some scenes set in space as well. And not to mention the soundtrack, it's really fun and I still listen to it on the daily. Okay, so in case I wasn't clear, the Book of Boba Fett, very good. Go watch it. Another show I was so excited for is The Witcher Season 2. This was a show that I again loved on release, and again we've had a couple of years to wait for the second season, but it was a wait worth waiting for. In my opinion, Season 2 could be stronger than the original season. I think that the characters have had chance to really settle into the skin of the characters from the books and the game. Now, I did start watching it, but I haven't finished watching it. I have got the finale to watch yet. I've been pacing myself because I didn't want to just rush through it. So I will probably talk about my thoughts on the finale in my Everything I Watched in March recap. What's been fun about this season is the fact that they filmed everything in the UK, so when watching the episodes I've been able to spot a few familiar settings, and we have actually since gone to visit some of the filming locations like Gardale Scar and the Fountains Abbey. The three main leads are giving their all, and I cannot fault Anya or Henry as Yennefer and Geralt, and I think that Freya has really upped her game as Ciri in this season. Yes, first name terms. Unfortunately though, I do think that the soundtrack has lost something since they're not using Sonia Belousova anymore. I did really love the original soundtrack of season 1, but we do still get a few fun songs from the Bard Jaskier, which is fun. Okay, so now let's move on to some of the movies that I watched in the month of February. So first up, I watched Friday the 13th Part 3. I gave this 2.5 stars on Letterboxd, but I have done a standalone episode for this movie, a standalone review, so I will link that here. Then I watched Gonjiam Haunted Asylum, released in 2018. I was considering doing a standalone episode for this movie because I was so impressed with it. I gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd. I would highly recommend this to you, and this is definitely one of my favourite watches of the month. The crew of a horror web series travels to an abandoned asylum for a live broadcast. It soon encounters much more than expected as it moves deeper inside the nightmarish old building. So Gunjam is actually a found footage movie, and I think for me, I find it hard to enjoy a lot of found footage movies if their reasoning for having the camera set up doesn't feel organic or feel like it really makes sense. But Gunjam Haunted Asylum do this really, really well, and we have quite a variety of footage within the movie because as they're a film crew, they have lots of different cameras at their disposal. So we have motion capture cameras, we have GoPros, we have like vlogging cameras, and they also have some drones as well. It has a really strong screenplay as well. It's a very simple but really interesting story, and I loved the way that they introduced the characters to the audience in a natural way as well. As for how scary this movie is, I have to say that really depends on you as an audience member. For me, this tapped into what I find scary. It's ghosts and the paranormal. So the build-up in this film, the use of camera angles of dead, empty space in shots and ominous hums and bangs and clatterings around the building, that really worked for me, and I found that really, really creepy. There were some incredibly effective scares that were so subtle but really unnerving. I would say when it built up towards the end and you began to see more of what was doing the haunting, that became less scary for me. Although, make what you will of it, when I was refreshing my memory of everything that I watched in February to do this episode, that night I then went on to have a nightmare about Gunjam Haunted Asylum. So there you go. Maybe that tells you something about how scary this movie is. But I had a really fun time watching this movie from what I saw from behind my fingers, but I would highly recommend this one. Then I watched Tremors, released in 1990. Val and Earl, two handymen staying in Perfection, Nevada, decide to leave the town but stumble upon the dead body of a friend. They find that strange underground creatures are killing people. I love Tremors. I gave it 4.5 stars and a heart on Letterboxd. I have seen it before a few times, but a long time ago, and I forgot just how wonderful this movie is. So I decided to watch the entire Tremors franchise so I could watch along with the dead meat kill counts for it. And on rewatching the original Tremors, I think this has found its way into my top 10 horror movies of all time. I really enjoy the desert town setting with just a very small population, and I think when it comes to the creatures, the practical effects are incredible, and there's also enough humour in here that lands just right. I'm not sure all of it is intentional humour, but I think that the writing and the characters, there's just a lot of enjoyment to be found in this film. Okay, then I watched My Bloody Valentine 3D, released in 2009, and this is a remake of the original My Bloody Valentine, which is also another one of my favourite horror movies. Not everybody loves this movie, and I'm not saying that I do love it. It's definitely nowhere near as good as the original movie, and there is a gratuitous nudity scene in this film that I'm pretty sure doesn't need to be there. But generally, I think it's a fair remake. I really did enjoy the switcheroo that they do with the killer reveal in the end, and I think that it has some pretty cool kills in it as well, especially one involving Mr. Tom Atkins. Then I watched Tremors 2, released in 1996. Now this was fun. Honestly, this was not half bad. I actually gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. It was a fun time watching it. I think that it had some genuinely funny moments in it, and it still had a nice mixture of practical effects with CGI. Then I watched Valentine, that came out in 2001, but again I have done a standalone episode for that, so I will link that here. Then it's back to Tremors for Tremors 3, released in 2001. This one is not good at all. I gave it 1.5 stars on Letterboxd. I found this one boring and honestly hard work to get through. And the new evolution stage of the graboids from the original movie that they introduce in this film is called Arse Blaster. So, I mean, make of that what you will. Next up, I watched the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, released in 1974. Now, I have also done a standalone episode for that, so I will link that one here. Now, of all the episodes where I've done a standalone one that I'm going to recommend in this episode, I would love you guys to check this one out. This is one that I was really proud of. It is a review, but it's also a deep dive, and I did so much research into this one, so I would really love it if you guys could go show that one some love. I gave it 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, and this is another one that has made its way into my top 10 horror movies. Then I watched the original My Bloody Valentine, released in 1981, and I gave this 4.5 stars on Letterboxd. This is a movie that I watch every Valentine's Day now. It's a bit of a tradition, and it becomes more of a favourite with every rewatch. I really love the mining town setting of this movie and the Valentine Day aesthetic, that contrast between the dirty, dark coal of the mine and the cute and quaint reds and pinks of the hearts and streamers of the Valentine decorations. It's something that I've noticed I really gravitate towards in movies where it has a really small town setting, whether it's a mining town or a desert town or a fishing town. The look of the killer in this movie of Harry Warden the miner is one that I really, really love. I think it stands out so well against some of the other killer images, and I think it's such a shame that in the UK we don't really get a lot of merchandise of My Bloody Valentine or Harry Warden the miner. The copy that I have of My Bloody Valentine as well is one of those where all of the cuts have been cut out, but as much as it's a shame, it's such a good film anyway that I don't think it really takes away my enjoyment of it. Next, I watched the brand new Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Netflix. This is another one where I have done a standalone review of it, so I will either link it here or in the description box. Every single standalone episode that I mention in this episode, I will link in the description box. Okay, next up, this movie is a first watch for me and is neither, wait for it, a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, a Tremors movie, or a Valentine movie. It is Underwater, released in 2020 and starring Kirsten Stewart. Disaster strikes more than 6 miles below the ocean's surface when water crashes through the walls of a drilling station. Led by their captain, the survivors realise that their only hope is to walk across the sea floor to reach the main part of the facility. But they soon find themselves in a fight for their lives when they come under attack from mysterious and deadly creatures. Underwater has been on my to-watch list for quite a while now, and I finally got round to putting it on and watching it, and I was quite impressed. It was a genuinely solid creature feature, and I was genuinely impressed by Kirsten Stewart's acting in this, having only seen her in a Twilight movie previously. I've mentioned before, and I'll probably mention it again, I love movies that are set in, on, or around water, and I think that's why this one really appealed to me, and it really reminded me of films like The Abyss and Sphere, with it having an underwater station setting. What stood out to me about Underwater and what makes it so interesting is that this movie doesn't wait around. There is no build-up or introduction of characters. You are thrown in at the deep end, pardon the pun, after about 4 minutes in the movie, and it never lets up after that. And I have to say that the level of tension, claustrophobia, and feeling out of control that is both created and maintained through this movie is incredible. It never lets up, it never lets you relax, which can make for uncomfortable watching at times, but it's just so well executed. I gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. Next, it was a rewatch for me of Rear Window, released in 1954. Jeff, a professional photographer, is confined to a wheelchair in his apartment due to a broken leg. Bored, he begins to spy on his neighbours, and soon he believes he has witnessed a murder. With the help of his nurse and girlfriend, he sets out to prove he did. So like I said, Rear Window was a rewatch for me. I like to watch it every year if I can do. It's one of my absolute favourite movies of all time, and it's such a comfort watch for me as well. Alfred Hitchcock, his odd treatment of women sometimes aside, is my favourite movie director. I think that his movies just have something that you can't quite put your finger on, you can't quite explain, but I absolutely love them. And despite Rear Window being set in just one room with the view out onto the courtyard by the apartments, it's never boring. I never once want to pick up my phone and look at something on there, because the story and the dialogue is so intriguing that it just keeps you engaged with it. I think that Hitchcock really taps into the inner people watcher in us, our inner nosy neighbour, and it really feels like us, along with the main character Jeff, are doing something we shouldn't be. We're watching something we shouldn't be. We are intruding on people's private lives, and I think that James Stewart gives a great performance in this, and Grace Kelly is exquisite. I gave Rear Window 5 stars and a heart, and it is a forever favourite for me. Ooh! Then I went to the cinema and I watched the newly released Uncharted. Treasure hunter Victor Sully Sullivan recruits street-smart Nathan Drake to help him recover a 500-year-old lost fortune. What starts out as a heist soon becomes a globe-trotting, white-knuckle race to reach the prize before the ruthless Santiago Moncada can get his hands on it. So some of you may know, some of you may not know, but Uncharted is my favourite video game and video game franchise of all time. I love each and every one of the movies and I regularly replay them, and I actually cried at the end of Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. So when I heard that they were making a movie, I was cautiously excited. I was then worried when the game was delayed for years. Yes, years. It is never a good sign when a film is delayed, and it's never a good sign when a video game adaptation is delayed. But I loved it. I think that they did a really good job of adapting this game to the big screen. Not perfect, but damn good. There are scenes in this movie that could have literally been lifted out of the games, whether it's gameplay or a cutscene. There are puzzles to solve, there are big bosses, there are big action scenes. The action is taken to all different places around the world, and the opening of the movie is very similar to the opening of Uncharted 2. So we have Tom Holland playing Nathan Drake and Mark Wahlberg playing Victor Sullivan, and it was clear to me that these actors have seen the characters within the games, because they have definitely taken mannerisms from the game characters and put them into their portrayal. And honestly, I squealed when I saw Nolan North's cameo in the cinema. And if you don't know who Nolan North is, he is the voice actor and motion capture model of the game version of Nathan Drake. Oh, and I also might have squealed just a little bit later on towards the end of the movie when Nathan Drake gets his gun holster and it plays part of Nate's theme from the game. Yeah, big fangirl. What was funny about the movie is that most people left the cinema room, they all rushed out, but me and my son stayed to watch the credit scenes because we were enjoying the music and everything, and I'm so glad that we did, because there is actually a mid-credit cutscene that was so fun to watch, because the movie itself is set up as a prequel to the games. It's setting the scene, it's giving us a bit of backstory, and then this mid-credit scene, I think we're pretty much getting Victor Sullivan and Nathan Drake as we know them from the majority of the gameplay of the games, and we really see Victor Sullivan as Sully now, complete with cigar, fancy shirts and moustache. So I gave it 4 stars and a heart on Letterboxd, and I'm actually really excited for the sequel that they clearly have planned. But I guess, you know, they can have the plan and the idea, but it will really depend on how well Uncharted does financially as to whether it actually gets made. But we'll see. If it does, I will definitely be going to watch it. Next, I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, released in 1986. I've been making my way through the entire Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise as I was doing a ranking of all the Leatherfaces, and I was going to do a ranking of all of the movies as well. I have done the Leatherface ranking, so I will leave a link to that either here or in the description box. I haven't done a ranking of all of the movies, only because after doing such a research-heavy episode of the original, then watching the new release and then doing a ranking of Leatherface, I just felt a little bit burnt out with the franchise, but I might still at some point do a ranking. So I'm not going to talk too much about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 here, but I will say that I had a really good time with it. I don't always love it when movies don't feel like they fit together, and even though this is a direct sequel to the first one and still done by Tobe Hooper, it feels very different. You know, it's very 80s-ified, but I still enjoyed it. I think it's a fun watch. I love Chop Top. I think Stretch is a great final girl, but I'm not a huge fan of this Leatherface, if I'm honest. Then it's back to Tremors for Tremors 4, released in 2004. I gave this 2.5 stars on Letterboxd. It's an improvement from Tremors 3, but it's still not great. It does a Back to the Future 3 where it takes us back to the Old West, and I will say that that made it more interesting. Mixing up the time period was really good, but we are a long way from the brilliance of the original movie. And finally, I watched Deep Rising, released in 1998. After the crew and passengers of a luxury liner in the South Seas are brutally murdered by a monster, a gang of jewel thieves find themselves trapped on board. So Deep Rising is a water creature feature from the 90s, and it was directed by Stephen Sommers, who would go on to direct The Mummy a year later. It's also scored by the same guy who scores The Mummy, and it stars Kevin O'Connor, who stars as Benny in, yes, you guessed it, The Mummy. It was fine. I gave it 2.5 stars on Letterboxd. There were parts of it that I did genuinely enjoy and bits that I found quite boring. I'd say, you know, if you like creature features, if you like 90s action movies. If you like the guy who did The Mummy, then maybe give it a try, but just don't expect too much from it. Okay guys, so there you have it, everything that I watched in the month of February. We have a mixture of TV shows, rewatches, franchise things, Valentine themed, and 2 brand new releases. So my favourites this month, I'm going to have to split into 2 categories because this was really hard given that I watched some of my favourite movies that month. So my rewatch favourites are Rear Window, Tremors, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, and My Bloody Valentine 1981. And my new watch favourites are Gone GM Haunted Asylum, Uncharted, and The Book of Boba Fett. So let me know what your guys' favourites are from everything that I watched in February, and let me know if any of these have made it to your to watch list as well. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye guys.